Father Time always wins, right? So Putin is not going to be around forever. And if we think about Russia in kind of structural terms, it's too wealthy, it's too urban, it's too well educated to be as corrupt and undemocratic as it is right now. Right? So one way, and even if you think about inequality, I mean, inequality in Russia is high, but it's mostly high because there are so many billionaires, not because there are so many really, really poor people. And there are lots of countries in Latin America who are democracies that have inequality rates higher than Russia. Oil is often cited as a barrier for building democracy, and that's true. But you know, the Russian economy is more than just oil and gas, although increasingly it's played an important role. But you know, that need not be determinative. So, although the picture of Russia is 1,000 years of autocracy and a lot of you know, Germany had a long period of non-democracy. Japan did. Lots of countries have been non-democratic for long periods of time. You know, there are reasons, I think, to be more optimistic about what a post-Putin leader might look like. As you know, what is Vladimir Putin thinking? This is the question I'm least prepared to answer, but let me try anyway. I think, in terms of tactics, you know, on Ukraine, I mean, people have pictured Ukraine as this great, you know, a victory for Putin, who's able to rally the domestic troops at home and take back Crimea, also able to, you know, weaken Ukraine. But I think if you asked Putin, would you rather have control over, you know, the two regions of the Donbass and the Crimea, and the rest of the country that is virulently anti-Russian, or a Kiev that was like under Yanukovych, malleable, yeah, pro-Western government comes in, but it's Ukraine, so, you know, policy, you know, people rotate through government, there's not huge shifts in policy, a manageable problem. I think, you know, a real deep strategic thinker would have said, I like that, you know, I like that second version more than I like having, you know, the rump states of Donbass and Crimea and the rest of Crimea being against me. So I don't think that, you know, Russian policy towards Ukraine was this brilliant strategic move designed to, you know, split Europe and, you know, drive a wedge. I don't think that was what was going on. And I don't think it's been as much of a success as people say. On Syria, I think it was a brilliant tactical move to introduce military force by the Russians and to support Assad. You know, whether you think, I don't like Assad, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons, but from the Kremlin's point of view, that was an opening where Russia was willing to step in, to back up an ally, to pay a price that other countries weren't willing to pay. But what he didn't anticipate, and in the same way this is a similar problem to Ukraine, is that when you do something like this, the risk of uncertainty is so great, the risk of unanticipated events. You know, a Russian plane gets shot down violating Turkish airspace. You know, but for that, then the crisis would look very, very different. So a real deep strategic thinker would have said, my God, there's the Alawites, and they're going to create complications at home, and there's Iran and Saudi Arabia, and we're trying to play them off, and we want them to cooperate on the oil market. At the same time, you know, we're siding with one against the other. That this becomes really, really complicated, and a, you know, different approach might have been, you know, something that was a little more prudent and recognizing, you know, what a tremendous risk and how high how great the likelihood of unanticipated consequences would be.
Yeah, that's great, and I think, you know, in international relations as academics, we often sort of struggle with, you know, do states act in a calculating, strategic way to maximize their interests, or are they more social creatures, right? Are they affected by things like concerns about status, about their identity, about their image? And I think how you answer that question really impacts how you view what the end game is or what the strategy is, right? If you view Russian foreign policy behavior as more driven by social status, then the very fact that they are now part of the conversation in Syria, that they are being paid attention to, that, you know what, if we don't use force in Ukraine and Syria, you ignore us. Now we use force, we're part of the solution. Now we're talking grand bargains. Now we're doing all these things. You know, maybe if the social dynamics are what's driving behavior out of the Kremlin and driving public opinion, then maybe that's enough. And all the kind of material consequences that we talked about can be sacrificed. But I find really in lines of Vladimir and Carol's point about, this isn't strategic, or it's, it's adjusting, in response to circumstances, and yet so many of the narratives that we read, the popular narratives, are the opposite, right? That this is, decisive figure, master strategist, and in American circles too, in Western circles. So this is all very interesting. So please join me in.
If I may,
yeah.
I wanted to address the question: who's after Putin? I think it depends on how Putin goes. If it's a quiet departure, then I'm certain that the next leader of Russia would be handpicked by Putin. And if it's not a peaceful departure, then all bets are off. The real problem in Russia right now is the crisis of leadership. There is, since all the opposition leaders, or most of them, were severely marginalized, I personally don't see anybody who can potentially become a successful presidential candidate.
One bit of, I was very optimistic about, the post-Putin Russia, but there is one bit of social science research which suggests a much more pessimistic outlook, and that is we usually divide autocracies into personalist autocracies like Russia, where a single individual is really in charge and makes the important decisions. One-party autocracies like Mexico for years, like the PRI or China, and military autocracies. And here's where the bad news comes in. When autocratic leaders and personalist regimes, when they lose power, it tends to be really ugly. 70% of them lose power through non-constitutional means, shall we say, street revolts, assassinations, coups, and only about 20% of the actual leaders themselves end up not dead, not in exile, not in prison. And those figures are much, much higher for military-led dictatorships or for one-party dictatorships.
So Tim, you had given us the optimistic
I know.
view.
I think just to
should have cut it off.
fiduciary responsibility.